gonna have some bad weather.
Very bad. Like,
I lived in Oklahoma too long.
did you?
I had a storm cell.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much required you over there.
Yanked those three little boys up with the run to that storm cell, and I don't think that baby was saying.
I bet not.
They hated it.
Well, it's 3 minutes still.
Next season.
Watch the cancel or something. We'll have a little auditorium or something. I hear Miss Hurts, really Rob too. I heard Miss Hurts' voice outside.
Oh, okay.
Good. Good.
Yeah.
Here.
He was sick, I don't know.
Yeah.
What's
He had, she said he had been to a convention or something and come back sick.
All of a sudden,
VW shirt. Yeah.
Yeah. Yards this year.
oh.
1987.
Have you really?
Evening.
Maybe.
Walked out with I'm sorry?
Are you teaching?
I walked out with all my stuff at the house.
Did you really?
Did you? Yeah. Let's start with it.
Mark?
I can wing it.
Get your phone.
Huh?
There.
Hey, go phone.
I'll give us the space so I can get our step here. And then
How are you?
Good.
Okay. Run around.
That's your mom.
You're doing much better.
I'm good. Look, I got my foot back.
Get your foot back.
Oh, yay for you. Weather, get in your food. Tweets it and says, does that hurt? And I was like, not really. And he's like, well, it's not going to be 100%.
I've been,
But
yeah,
until 6 months. But you can go ahead and walk on it now. I said, well, can I drive? And he said, yeah. I was like,
That's great.
There he is.
wow.
we did some real well. It's been visited at the house.
Overdue.
Well,
Probably.
we'll
Real overdue.
Yeah.
Well, I did take my boots with me to work just today, just in case my foot got tired. And I needed to.
This morning before 5, I know.
Well, maybe it won't come in time to
Thank you very much.
That was really sweet. Some of her teachers were still there, and second grade teachers were still there, and fourth grade teacher wasn't, but Kane's birthday was there.
My second grade teacher turned out 5.
Start winning.
No, of course not. They're terrible this year. That's terrible. Good to see the I got a few of the guys upstairs.
Oh, really? Oh, okay, cool.
How's he doing? He's doing great. Good job.
Okay, good.
See what happens.
That always helps.
It helps.
They, all the kids line up.
Hey, Marco.
I am. I'm back in black.
Yeah. Well, you got a little bit.
Nah, yeah, that is true. That's true.
How was the, oh, yeah, okay. Good.
Heavenly Father, thank you so much for today and for all of our blessings. Thank you for the time that you've allowed us to come be together with brothers and sisters to worship you, learn more about your word, and be strengthened and encouraged by one another. I'd like to be with Rob and the other teachers, something to convey the things that they have prepared to us in ways easy for us to understand and apply to our lives, and to apply to the lives of those around us. To be with those who are not able to make it tonight, due to sickness or weather or whatever. To be with those who decided not to come and chosen not to be here, and to be with them and something may change their hearts to bring them back to us. To be with us throughout the service and your son's name.
Amen. All right. So we are in Matthew 20, chapter 20. I think Clay got us down to like verse 28. We finished that. Appreciate Clay filling in for me on Sunday. And, I kind of looked at, it looks like we're only about Clay motored on pretty good. I think we're only about a chapter behind. I was looking this afternoon at how many class periods we have left. So we're getting ready to get into actually even some more meaty chapters, so to speak, in this last week of Jesus' life. But we're not too far bad unless I get really long-winded tonight or Sunday. So one thing I want us to look at, verse 28 in chapter 20. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. So, Clay has done good in kind of keeping us to focus on application. And we could really probably go several class periods on all the application we could learn from the life of Christ. But one of the things we talked about is Jesus is our ultimate example of a servant. And I want us to think about that for a minute before we go, because I think it's important. So, we live in a society, obviously, that is very selfish. Get all you can out of life. You deserve to have what you want to have. I, me. Our society wants us to focus on us. And again, you deserve to be happy, and that's not, we see just the opposite of Jesus when he had compassion on people and he constantly was serving others. Somebody say something? Okay. But I want us to think about in kind of this framework of God. I'm going to put brothers in a very ugly looking way, and then put world, society. Okay. And so, are we acting like Christ from a servant perspective? Okay, and I think first we got to look at our service or serving God. Okay, I think we know that's key, and we'll see that in the next chapter of the greatest commandment is love God with all your heart. But are we serving God as well as we could be? How is our worship? Do we come here and we just come late and leave early? And I think the challenge a lot of us have, especially with this one, with brothers, how do we serve our brothers and sisters? A lot of us, we may come into church we kind of with blinders on, and we're just worried about us. We have ourselves in this bubble, but we're not thinking about others. Or, I tend to, at the closing song or something, I know we want to go hang out with our core group. But if you look around maybe in a 20-foot radius of where you're sitting and say, hey, I know Matt's mom has had some problems lately. I need to go say something to him and see how she is. Or, Jimmy might need prayers. I'm going to go talk to her. I think we've got to, I'm really just challenging us all to be better servants, to be servants like Christ. And it's always good to have self-examination. And, we do this year to year. We have a new goal every year, but I think really monthly, you know, I like that. What's that commercial with the reset button, the office supply place? You know, I like the quarter system because I think we can reset. But I think the question is, hey, what have I done for my brothers and sisters lately? You know, when's the last time you had people in your home? When's the last time you had lunch with somebody in this room? You know, if we say, hey, I can't remember the last time I had anybody in my house, or I hadn't been to lunch with somebody here. You know, the only time I see these my brothers and sisters are when I'm here on Wednesday and Sunday. So, again, I think the challenge is for us to just look at how we're being a servant. And, you know, certainly the world and society, there's all kinds of things, you know, do good to all mankind, especially those of the household of faith. Or, is that right? That's close enough, yeah. So, I think we understand that, you know, there's a lot, we can volunteer, you know, we think about our time, and there's a lot of good things we can do, but I just, for some reason, that verse hit me, and, you know, Jesus didn't come to be served, but to serve and give his life for a ransom of many. How is that giving your life for the ransom of many? That's the true servant. But, you know, I think it's incumbent on us to, you know, if we are doing more servant things individually, we'll be stronger individually and we'll be stronger collectively. So, I just thought that was worth mentioning. Anybody have any comments on that?
You are correct on, it's a me world. I've seen it change so much in the last 30, 40 years. It's insane. This is mine. I want it now. You can't tell me what to do. This is my body. So quit preaching to me. That's what you said. I don't have to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think that's going away anytime soon, but
It isn't.
I think we've got to kind of recondition ourselves and maybe, you know, challenge ourselves some. You know, I've talked about it. You know, our theme this year is preach the gospel. So, you know, you talk about a way to serve, you know, bringing people to Christ is, you know, we would definitely say that's being a servant. So, think about that. Maybe write some notes down in your book. Maybe try to give yourself somewhat of a goal of, hey, I want to talk to these people after church, or that's going to be my new thing. Or I'm going to go sit on the other side of the building and get to know everybody over there. Or I'm going to take Salon and Jimmy out to, you know, Fleming Fine Steakhouse. I think Matt said he would take y'all out this time. So, you get the point. So, I think that's good. Yes, ma'am.
Having the joy attitude, Jesus first,
Yes.
next, and then yourself last.
Right. Yeah. You know, one of the things we used to do is try to, you know, obviously when you have kids, I know Mitzi and John have always done a great job at this, you know, is bring the kids over your house, you know, and the parents, I mean, because you want your kids to be around other kids that have spiritual values, and so, you know, invite them over with your kids and invite the parents over, and so there's things like that we know we can all do. The question is, are we doing them? So, all right, we'll move on. Verse 29 through 34, we have this account of two blind men receiving their sight. And how do we know these men knew who Jesus was?
Everybody was coming along and saying, look, this is Jesus.
Okay, that's true. But in verse 30 specifically, what do they say that kind of gives us an indication of they might have had some knowledge of Jesus?
They heard that Jesus was passing by and cried out,
What did they cry out?
"Have mercy on us, O Lord, Son of David."
Yeah, so they had some knowledge, the Messiah, the Son of David. This is not the first time we've seen this. So generally when we see that term, somebody has some knowledge of the Old Testament and the, quote, Messiah coming. Same type thing we talked about, you know, Jesus, they wouldn't be quiet. And Jesus finally asked them, hey, what is it that you want? And, of course, they asked for their sight. He touched them, and immediately they were healed. Just another, you know, example of his compassion of stopping to help somebody. Anybody got any comments on that? All right, let's jump into chapter 21 here. And let's see here. That's lesson 19 in the book. We have this account of what we typically call the triumphal entry into Jerusalem, verses 1 through 11. This is recorded in all four gospel accounts. And it is noteworthy that, you know, this is really, we're coming to an end of Jesus' life. He's got 1 week left. And so a lot of the historians, sometimes it's hard for them to nail down the exact days on certain things, but they do know that this time, you know, the next Sunday, or Friday, is going to be crucified. So Matthew devotes a third of the book of this week to Jesus' last week. So so we see him come near to Jerusalem, but he stops at where in verse 1, kind of veers off.
Mount of Olives.
To where?
Mount.
I'm sorry, yes, Bethpage and Mount of Olives, yes. And so we know the story, he sends these 2 disciples into the village to find a donkey and a colt that's tied up and bring it to him. It appears from the other Gospels, from Mark, Luke, and John, that he rides in on the colt, not the donkey. So we see in verse 5 here, this is a prophecy from Zechariah 9:9. Tell the daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming to you, lowly and sitting on a donkey, a colt, the foal of a donkey. So, any ideas on why Christ rode in on a donkey?
Well, it's not the fastest animal on the face of the earth.
That is very true. Yes.
It's the one riding it. It's the one.
Correct.
It's the opposite of what everybody would expect a king to come in on. He's the opposite of the king, our earthly king, and so his transportation matches that.
There's no pomp and ceremony like the horses and what have you.
Right. So, yes.
But he, you know, for years he's been saying, don't tell anybody that I'm the one. And then this is the time.
Yeah,
you know,
switches gears here
yeah.
for sure. Yeah. So it's kind of like a couple of things. The gesture of this donkey might have been because God told Israel to be a peculiar people. Jesus was not going to ride in on a horse, which is what the Egyptians or the kings of Canaan and Assyria would have done. And also, the kings of Israel were not to multiply horses for themselves in Deuteronomy 17:16. So there was to be this distinguishing factor from the kings of the Gentiles, and obviously this entry by Jesus would have been distinguishing. Kurt said it, or Clay said, the donkey is also a beast of burden that also symbolizes his lowliness and his servant character. So, yes.
It's also prophesied in Zechariah 9:9.
Yeah.
Which the context of it is kind of talking about what you're alluding to, that there is this level of humility that the other nations are condemned for in the earlier part of Zechariah 9. So like Zechariah 9:4. But now the Lord will strip away Tyre's possessions and hurl its fortifications into the sea. It has a strong fortress made of silver and gold, plentiful as dust in the streets. And then he just goes on and talks about all of these other nations that are strong and mighty, and they've got fortifications and gold and horses and chariots. But I'm going to send this guy, and he's going to ride on this baby donkey, and he's going to bring peace to the entire planet.
Yeah, yeah. And just in conjunction with that, you know, like I said earlier, he didn't ride in on a war horse. A lot of those guys would do that in like a war chariot type thing. So if you're a Roman soldier in Jerusalem and you see this, quote, king come in like this, you're probably going to think to yourself, hey, this guy's not a military threat to Rome, you know, coming in like this. So, yeah, so all good comments. So, in verse 8 and 9, what are the people shouting about? Or what are they saying?
Calling him Son of David.
Yeah, Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. So it doesn't appear like the people of Jerusalem were concerned about him, you know, or laughing at him riding on a donkey. I mean, obviously they know, they've heard about him. Who knows how many of them were affected by his healings, and they're definitely kind of giving him the red carpet treatment here. So originally Hosanna was a heaven-sent SOS message that meant like save now or please help. But here it seems to be like this cry of praise that comes out of Psalms 118:26. So this day is thought to be the Sunday before Jesus is crucified. But what I find interesting and I guess ironic, these people are praising him now, but literally could some of these same people in a week from now be shouting, crucify him? Yeah. It is very possible. So it's very interesting. At least Jesus is getting, a small recognition of who they're giving him in my opinion, the right welcome he deserves for who he is. But, it's going to change very quickly. Any comments on that? Any questions? All right, verses 12 through 15, we have this second account of Jesus cleansing the temple. Supposedly there is approximately 2 years in between this first and second cleansing. So ample time for, the reappearance of this type thing. Selling, money exchanges. Verse 13, it is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you've made it a den of thieves. So I think we're obviously aware of this account, but Jesus at the end of this is also continuing to heal the lame and the blind. But how did the chief priests and the scribes react to Jesus' miracles and the children's word in verse 15?
Mine says indignant.
Yeah, I have indignant. They were indignant, which means feeling or showing anger, or what is perceived as unfair treatment. Obviously, this is another character trait of the Jewish leaders we definitely don't want to emulate. But in verse 16, we see Jesus responds to verse 15. He said, out of the mouth of babes. Again, that's from Psalms 8:2. This refers to the fact that the Jewish leaders should have been able to recognize and praise Jesus, but refused to. So the children kind of take up the flag here and praise Jesus. And again, that was probably a beautiful thing to see as, kids, we think about our own kids, and if you see them praising Jesus, that probably would have been a beautiful.
On to Jesus, he's winning the crowds.
They're
Yeah,
also looking for an earthly king,
true.
not
Yeah,
a heavenly king.
yeah.
They see somebody that's, poverty stricken, humble person from nowhere, nobody, getting all this praise and accolades that they feel they should be getting.
Oh yeah, for sure, yeah. And it just heightens as we go on. And Jesus is starting to kind of take the gloves off too here with some of his, accusations. He doesn't really make a point about judgment on that, but it's more about faith, what he says to them. Because obviously he knows the disciples are going to, be tested. Their faith is going to be tested beyond anything that they've gone through so far. So they're going to need a strong faith. So as he talks about, but also I say to you, this mountain be removed and cast into the sea, it will be done. And whatever things you ask in prayer, believing you will receive it. So another good, lesson for us. How's your faith? How strong is our faith? What can we do to improve that? Being a servant, I would say, would be a good thing that would help our faith. Again, just trying to grow our faith is obviously something we all want to aspire to do. Any comments on the fig tree or anything there? All right. So again, we see Jesus getting questioned by basically his authority in 23 through 27. What two questions did they ask here?
Whose authority is doing this?
Yes.
And who gave it to you?
Right. Yes. By what authority are you doing these things, and who gave you this authority? So then what kind of counter question does Jesus ask them?
I'll ask you one question.
Yeah. And we've seen this before where he says, one thing which I'll tell you, I likewise will tell you by what authority. Let me read that again. Jesus answered and said to them, I also will ask you one thing, which if you tell me, I will likewise will tell you by what authority I do these. The baptism of John, was it from heaven or from men? So Jesus kind of tracks them here instead of, vice versa. They couldn't answer it either way, or they'd be exposed to the, to the brood of vipers, so to speak, they were. So what do? How do they deflect?
We don't know the answer.
Yeah, so basically they're lying. They reasoned in themselves and they knew what answers were, but they're trapped. So they just pretend not to know the answer here and try to, just move on. Any comments on that? Verse 28 through 32, the parable of the two sons. So we have these two sons. The father tells them, hey, I want you to go out and work today and in my vineyard. And what does the first son say?
I won't.
I'm not going to, but then what? Changes his mind. Second son, what does he say?
I'm going to go.
I'm going to go. I think we all see our kids here in some of this. So which son actually did what the father commanded him? The first one? Okay. And so which son represented the Jewish leaders? Yeah. They definitely two sons represent two extremes here. Those that are, quote, at the high end of the religious scale and those that are at the low end, so to speak. The tax collectors and the harlots represented the low end of the scale, which is where the first son was, but those at the low end of the scales can get into heaven, as verse 31 and 32 talk about. So sins of the flesh are bad, but sins of the spirit, legalism, pride, no mercy, are worse. And that's who the Jewish leaders were, chief priests and the elders. So they're all talk, and again, no fruit behind it, so to speak. All right, any comments on that? We have a bunch of little short sections here. Man, y'all are talkative tonight.
The tax collectors and the harlots are gonna enter the kingdom before you. So you're gonna be lowly. What I told them here.
I think it gets back to what keep in mind this is Matthew's Jewish, his audience is Jewish.
Right.
This is about the Jews should be understanding all this.
Yeah.
The priests should be understanding all this.
Right.
But they don't. And
Exactly.
people who are hearing it for the first time pick it up. It's like that crowd following them. They get it. They understand it. And
Yeah.
I think that's what the illustration is.
Yeah, good point.
Which one are we?
Right. Yeah. The parable of the wicked vine dressers, 33 through the end of the chapter here. What did the vine dressers do to the landowner's servants and sons? Yeah, they beat one, killed one, and then stoned another. And, there's this question. Eventually, the owner kept sending these servants, and eventually, who does he send? He sends his son. And there's kind of like this question of, hey, you watched your servants get killed. Why are you now sending your son after what happened to these servants? So Mark's account says he had yet one, a beloved son. He sent him last unto them, saying, they will reverence my son. And obviously a clear analogy of what's about to happen to Jesus here, how they're just, going to kill him for no reason. But who recognized themselves here at the end, the wicked, who were the wicked vine dressers of the parable? Chief priests and the Pharisees. Yeah, and they, again, that's a pretty tough punch there that, Jesus threw at them, so to speak, but obviously it fits the bill. And they wanted to lay hands on him right there, but they feared who? Yeah, the crowds. So I think we should understand who God here is sending Jesus and who the players are. You can really dig into this a lot more and, figure out different, I guess, analogies or, I'm not going to say messages, but it's strictly about what's about to happen and who's doing it, that we're going to see all play out in the next few chapters. All right, any other comments on that? One of the things, here it is. The book on page 68 at the very bottom talks about kind of summarizing this. I think is This parable is clear prophecy of the end of the old national kingdom of the Jews to be replaced by a new nation established by the Messiah or the church, and the opening of the kingdom to the Gentiles. Rebellious Jews persecuted and killed the prophets of old, and they will kill the Son of God. Paul writes that salvation will come to the Gentiles because of the fall of the Jews, but that the Jews and all men can be saved if they come to faith in Christ. So I thought that was a pretty good summary of that whole section there. All right. I got to do that a little quicker than I thought. Let's jump into 22. Any other comments on chapter 21? That was actually quite a bit of information. All right, 1 through 14 in chapter 22 is the parable of the wedding feast. This is the third series of 3 parables Jesus directly addressed to the Pharisees. There's a connection here between all of these. And also there's a progression here of intensity in the sins of the Pharisees and how they're working, and also more of a stronger and stronger punishment to be incurred by the Pharisees and the Jewish leaders. So, what was the first reaction of the invited guests? These are all questions for the book, by the way. Yes, they didn't want to come. Any ideas why they didn't want to come? They did give excuses. So apparently, you know how we send out wedding invitations. It was customary in this time for like them to send one out way in advance and then send out another one close to our second invitation at the time of the wedding. So the servants they ignore them, so to speak. And then what is their second reaction? The servants who were invited. Verse 6. No.
Killed them.
Yeah, their second reaction, is just basically to, insult them and kill them, which is obviously very, very harsh. You're being invited to this wedding, and they made light of it at first, and then they went on their way. And then verse 6, they seized his servants, treated them spitefully, and killed them. So this brutality would obviously fit about Jesus talking about how the prophets were received, and his warning is what's going to happen to both him and his disciples. So,
I think verse 6 is interesting, though, that it calls out the shocking, unjustified murder.
Yeah, exactly.
That didn't need to be murdered.
Exactly.
Somebody murdered, but you get the point.
Yeah, it definitely hits you in the face with how extreme reaction it is. But again, it's a great parable to show exactly what's about to happen. So when they did this, what's the king's reaction in verse 7? Yeah, I mean, his patience are gone. So I mean, he exacts vengeance upon them, sends the soldiers in, destroys them and their city. There's talk that this could be a hint to the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. But who, at that point, who was invited to take their place?
Everybody.
Everybody. Yes.
Going out in the streets, city, everywhere.
Yeah, this king, he's adamant. He's going to have a ceremony for his son. But the application is he originally invited Israel or some of the Jewish nation who rejected the invitation. So now the Gentiles are going to be called to the feast. Then we have this, we kind of transition into this story of this man who's not wearing a wedding garment. What happened to him and why?
It's thrown out in the street. He wasn't dressed properly.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think socially, we even know, hey, if somebody invites me to a wedding or a funeral, I mean, we know not to wear shorts and, flip-flops. I mean, that's not respectful to the family. That's not respectful in any of those scenarios. But one sidebar point, I mean, we talk about, I think we'd all agree, society today, I think we don't dress like we used to. Everybody in my business time, a lot of industries all wore ties, and they were all very, very, we had to for many, many years. And,
the only people that I see or industries or sectors that I see now advertised are like lawyers, maybe some bankers at the corporate level. That's all that I see that really do that. But my point is, this guy wasn't dressed appropriately, and I'm talking about a physical side of this. We'll get the spiritual analogy in a minute, but how do we? This guy didn't take it seriously, apparently, or there's also the culture back then was a lot of times if you were dressed like they would give you a robe when you came in to something like this. But apparently this guy didn't prepare and he didn't have his robe on, and apparently, obviously, he just wasn't prepared. But my question is, how should we dress for worship?
Well, one word, modestly, in my opinion.
Okay.
Personally.
Okay.
I don't think we should come in, as you said, in flip-flops and shorts and a tank top or a t-shirt.
Okay. All right.
What's the best that you have,
Mm-hmm. All right.
whatever that is?
So, are you saying that if I dress down, that my heart, doesn't God just look at our hearts? I'm playing devil's advocate here.
Didn't Christ already deal with that? When he said, here, you said here, and my footstool, and the other person he said here.
Yeah. And I'm just throwing this out there. I'm not trying to make any dramatic or profound point here, but I think, for me anyway, I think it is important how we dress for worship. I'm not judging anybody's heart, but I think, if we're wearing shorts and, a ragged t-shirt, I don't know that shows respect for your brothers and sisters or respect for God and worship. Just my opinion here. Because technically we do come to a funeral every Sunday. We're going to remember Christ. And if you're going to give your best for God, best for some people may be a pair of jeans and, a shirt. Mm-hmm. And that's, I'm not here to judge that, but I think a lot of us would say our best, is more than that. I'm just talking in general for everybody in this, congregation. And I'm not throwing rocks at anybody. I'm just trying to get us think, are we giving our best to God in our worship? Are we being, or are we being a distraction? Just something to think about. Any other comments on that?
I think our physical dress is going to be an output of whatever's in your heart. That's not just for
True.
work, that should be
True.
anytime.
Right.
The comment I think that you made, but so if you care about what you're doing here at services, and while you're here, you're going to dress to match that.
Yeah.
You're going to act you're going to act that way. You're going to talk that way. You're going to put your head in the game almost. You know what I mean? To match. You're not just doing it for show.
If God physically was here 100%, physically, what would you want him to see?
Yeah.
You dressing like?
And that goes for here and everywhere else.
Right.
Yeah, true. Yeah, good points. I just thought that was somewhat of a connection there.
What's the point of correlation of weeping and gnashing of teeth here?
So, I think what it's talking about here is this whole section right here about this man is really about the final inspection of all men in the day of judgment. Apparently this man's apparel was an insult to the occasion. And really it could be construed as, shameful conduct. And what was this man's defense? He didn't have one because he knew what? He knew he was guilty. So, I think that's, how we think about spiritually, are we going to be in the day of judgment able to give a defense or not? If our conduct was shameful and disrespectful and disobedient, I think we're going to know it, and we're not going to be able to have a response. Yes.
Could this be used to refute a once saved, always saved argument?
It could be. I didn't really think about that, but yeah. That's a good point.
This man, he made it in, but he didn't do the right thing, and he got kicked out. So
It's just like us, I mean, we can be saved, but if we don't stay faithful, we can be kicked out. I don't know how close that aligns, but just a thought.
I think it could be, yeah. But whose fault was it with this guy?
The guy.
That's his own.
Yeah, so I think that's one thing we have to consider is he's responsible for his own behavior.
He wasn't prepared.
He wasn't prepared. I've seen situations or heard situations where, well, somebody said something to me a long time ago as a member of the church, and, it made me mad, and I don't want to be associated with that group of people. And so this person leaves the faith. So in the day of judgment, when that person bows and their tongue confesses, do you think they're going to be able to say, well, hey, those guys said something to me, I didn't like it, and I left? You think that's going to fly? I mean, I don't either. And I think we've got to understand that work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. So I don't think we can blame people for where we are spiritually. I think, people are going to do us wrong, quite frankly. It's going to happen. Maybe somebody says something you don't like, or, they called you out on some possible issues in your life. Whatever it is, for me, my thinking is, look, I'm in control of my own destiny. And, if I'm not doing these things on the day of judgment, I'm not going to have defense. I don't care if people are slapping me and beating me with rods. It's on me to do the right thing. And I think this man knew that, and he knew that he couldn't say anything. So I think that's a really sobering reminder to us that, we are in control of our soul salvation.
Christ used this weeping and gnashing of teeth several chapters earlier. I think it's 8:12. The person was cast in the outer darkness, weeping and gnashing of teeth, and that seems pretty strong to me. The only correlation I can make of that is, for those that could relate to it, when you had those teachers that would accidentally break a piece of chalk over a chalkboard. That drove chills through me. And then to get everybody's attention, he raked his fingernails across the chalkboard.
That's a good one.
I'm just saying, that's how.
You want to go up here and do it?
That's
the whiteboard on it.
You can't do it on that. That's right.
Yeah, well, I think it's, he's talking of, this is hell and damnation, is what he's talking about. Yeah, and then he says, for many are called, but few are chosen. He's used that analogy a couple of times here in Matthew. What's the number on many and what's the number on few? I don't have that, but I think we understand the point. All right, we'll pick up right there, verse 15 on Sunday. Thank you for your comment.
Definitely.
Man, y'all didn't see any cars, didn't do anything.
They had 2 or 3 that put in. They weren't ready, that's for sure. Not pretty much. Huh? Are you going to leave?
Are they ready to register? Everybody? You're not registered to move down there? Yeah. But the new.
My brother Mark in Florida, he's going to be leaving there. He lives in he's been down here a long time, and he should come back fire in a little while, and he can move up to Tennessee. He wants to come back here. All right, we'll see Sunday, hopefully.
I'm surprised you didn't know.
I love your team.